Royal Bath, demonstrating a dramatic range and maturity that her BGT performances had only hinted at. She also worked with the Royal Shakespeare Company, establishing herself as a genuine theatrical performer rather than a celebrity stepping onto a stage. Jonathan, meanwhile, released his debut solo album, Tenor, in 2014 under Sony Classical. It topped the Classical Artist Albums chart in the United Kingdom and established him immediately as a serious solo voice in the classical crossover world. A second album, Believe, followed in 2016, blending Italian operatic arias with powerful orchestral arrangements and further expanding his international audience. He toured extensively in Canada and the United States and produced a celebrated concert experience called Beyond the Curtain, which brought together operatic staples, musical theater favorites, and even Disney classics, revealing a theatrical playfulness alongside his extraordinary vocal power. By 2017, when Jonathan appeared on the television program Lorraine and was asked about his relationship with Charlotte, he was candid about the reality of their communication. They did not speak very often, he acknowledged, but framed as not as a falling out but simply as a natural consequence of two busy people moving through different professional worlds. He spoke warmly about his family as his primary support system and made clear that the distance between him and Charlotte was geographic and professional rather than personal or bitter. Neither has ever spoken harshly about the other. Both have consistently credited their shared BGT journey as foundational to everything that followed. Jonathan's personal journey extended far beyond his recordings and concerts. In recent years, he has spoken openly about a significant transformation in his health and well-being, having lost over 5 stone through gradual lifestyle changes and a renewed commitment to his physical and mental health. He described the process honestly, acknowledging periods of low discipline and poor well-being before making an active decision to take control of his life. His words on the subject resonated deeply with fans who had followed him since his teenage years and who recognized in his honesty something genuinely courageous. Charlotte, for her part, took a meaningful personal step in 2022 when she publicly came out as bisexual during Pride Month. She shared the announcement on Instagram alongside a photograph of herself wrapped in a pride flag, and the response from her fans and colleagues in the theater world was overwhelmingly supportive. The announcement was consistent with the authentic and open approach she had developed in her public presence, where she regularly uses social media to speak about mental health, the pressures of life in performing arts, and the importance of genuine self-expression. Her TikTok and Instagram platforms have earned her a new generation of followers who appreciate her warmth, humor, and honesty. More than a decade after they first stood together on that BGT stage and silenced a room with 2 teenage voices and one beautiful song, Jonathan Antoine and Charlotte Jaconelli continue to matter. Not because of what they won or did not win, not because of the charts their albums reached, and not even because of the extraordinary talent they clearly possess. They matter because of the story they told simply by being who they were. A story about friendship over opportunity, loyalty over ambition, and artistic integrity in an industry that does not always reward it. Whatever comes next for either of them, and fans continue to hope that a reunion performance remains a possibility, the magic they made together has not faded. It lives on in the recordings, in the memories of everyone who watched them, and in the simple, enduring truth that sometimes 2 voices are better than one. Hollywood has always been a place where the carefully constructed image and the private reality exist in uncomfortable tension with one another. The gap between the person the public believes they know and the person living behind closed doors has destroyed careers, shattered families, and produced some of the most painful public revelations in entertainment history. But occasionally, a story emerges that is not simply about scandal or exposure for its own sake. Occasionally, a story emerges that is about survival, about a woman finding her voice after years of silence, and about the courage it takes to tell the truth when the truth is deeply uncomfortable. The story of Melissa Gilbert and her marriage to Timothy Busfield is one that has taken years to fully come to light, and what has emerged tells us something important not just about 2 individuals, but about the broader patterns that women in the entertainment industry have long been forced to navigate quietly. This is that story. To understand what Melissa Gilbert eventually revealed, you first need to understand who Melissa Gilbert was to the American public, and what that identity cost her personally. She grew up before the cameras in the most literal sense. As Laura Ingalls Wilder in Little House on the Prairie, the beloved television series that ran from 1974 to 1983, Melissa became one of the most recognized faces in American homes. She was innocent, resilient, kind, and morally grounded, week after week, for nearly a decade. The character she played became inseparable from the person audiences believed her to be. Growing up famous is a complicated and often psychologically costly experience. The expectations placed on a child actor who has been cast as a moral heart of a family drama do not simply disappear when the cameras stop rolling. They follow you into adulthood, into your relationships, into your private life. Melissa has spoken at length over the years about the difficulties of navigating adult life and adult relationships while carrying the weight of that image. She struggled with substance use, with the pressures of the entertainment industry, with a particular loneliness of being known by millions while being truly understood by very few. Her romantic history before Timothy Busfield was turbulent. She had been engaged to Tom Cruise during the early years of his fame, a relationship she later wrote about in her memoir with considerable candor. She had been married twice before, experiencing the particular disappointments and disillusionment that come from entering relationships shaped more by longing and external pressure than by genuine compatibility and mutual understanding. By the time she met Busfield, she was a woman who had survived a great deal and who was, by her own account, cautious about what she was choosing. Timothy Busfield was himself a recognized face in American entertainment, best known for his role as Elliot Weston in the critically acclaimed drama 30-something, for which he won an Emmy Award. Busfield had established himself as a serious and respected actor. He was also a director and producer, someone with deep roots in the theatrical and television world. When he and Melissa began their relationship and eventually married in 2013, it appeared on the surface to be a union of two seasoned professionals who had both navigated the complexities of life in the public eye and found in each other a genuine and stable partnership. They settled into what appeared to be a quieter, more grounded life together, eventually relocating away from Los Angeles to rural Michigan, a move that Melissa described as deeply healing and necessary for her sense of self. She wrote about the transition in her memoir and spoke about it in various interviews as a kind of liberation, a shedding of the artificial and high-pressure world of Hollywood in favor of something more authentic and sustainable. The couple seemed, from the outside, to represent a kind of second-chance happiness, two people who had learned enough from their past experiences to build something real. The comfortable narrative changed when legal proceedings brought Timothy Busfield's conduct into public view in ways that could no longer be managed or minimized. The details of the situation placed Melissa in the position that many women in long-term relationships find themselves in when the private truth of their partnership becomes a matter of public record. The gap between the life she had presented publicly and the life she had actually been living became impossible to maintain. What followed was a decision that clearly did not come easily. Speaking out about the private dynamics of a marriage, particularly one that has been publicly associated with personal redemption and second-chance happiness, requires an enormous amount of courage and a willingness to accept the vulnerability that comes with public honesty. Melissa began, gradually and then with increasing directness, to describe the reality of her experience in the relationship in terms that her public persona and her instinct toward privacy had previously prevented her from fully articulating. She spoke about the psychological dimensions of the relationship, about the patterns she had recognized only in retrospect, and about the ways in which her public image and her personal history had made her susceptible to dynamics that someone with different experiences might have identified and challenged sooner. She was not presenting herself as a passive victim. On the contrary, she was offering something more complex and more honest than victimhood. She was describing the specific ways in which a strong, experienced, publicly accomplished woman can still find herself in a relationship that does not serve her dignity or her well-being, and she was doing so without the comfortable simplicity of a straightforward villain and hero narrative. One of the most significant threads running through what Melissa has shared publicly is a specific burden carried by women who have spent their careers being perceived as morally uncomplicated. The Laura Ingalls image followed Melissa Gilbert for decades, coloring how the public perceived her and, perhaps more significantly, coloring how she perceived herself and what she felt she owed to her audience and to her own constructed identity. There is a particular kind of silence that women in her position learn to practice. It is not the silence of weakness. It is the silence of someone who understands that the truth of their private life will be filtered through the lens of a public identity that has never fully belonged to them. To admit difficulty, to acknowledge dysfunction, to speak honestly about a relationship that has not been what it appeared, risks the kind of public judgment that can feel more costly than the private pain it would relieve. Many women make the calculation that silence is a lesser cost. Melissa Gilbert, in choosing to speak, was rejecting that calculation. Her revelations were also significant because they were not about revenge. The tone throughout has been reflective rather than retaliatory, focused on understanding and honesty rather than on damage. This distinction matters enormously. When a woman speaks publicly about difficult experiences within a marriage, she is almost inevitably accused of bitterness or of attempting to harm her partner's reputation for personal advantage. Melissa's approach has made it considerably harder to dismiss what she has shared on those grounds, because the emotional register of her disclosures has been consistently thoughtful rather than angry. In various interviews and public statements following the legal proceedings involving Busfield, Melissa has addressed the nature of their relationship with a directness that her earlier public persona would likely have found impossible. She described feeling isolated within the marriage in ways that were difficult to articulate to people who had watched the relationship unfold as a public success story. She spoke about the psychological cost of maintaining an appearance of happiness and stability while privately struggling with doubt, confusion, and a specific disorientation that comes from loving someone whose public persona and private behavior do not align. She described moments of clarity that came too late to prevent damage, but early enough to allow her to make decisions in her own interest. She talked about the process of disentangling her sense of self from a relationship that had become central to her public identity in the years following her departure from Hollywood. And she talked, with considerable emotional honesty, about the particular difficulty of leaving something that the world around her had been telling her was the best thing that had happened to her. What she exposed was not simply a person, but a pattern familiar to many women who have found themselves in relationships where the balance of power, the management of public narrative, and the psychological dynamics of the partnership have worked against their ability to see clearly and act in their own interest. In sharing that pattern openly, Melissa Gilbert did something that goes beyond personal disclosure. She contributed to a broader conversation about the ways in which public identity, romantic expectation, and the specific vulnerabilities of women in the entertainment industry intersect in ways that the industry itself has historically preferred not to examine. What is most striking about Melissa Gilbert's public reckoning with this chapter of her life is the degree to which it has been accompanied by evidence of genuine personal growth and forward motion. She has not remained fixed in the moment of exposure or defined herself entirely by what she endured. She has continued to work, to write, to speak, and to engage with the public in ways that reflect a woman who has processed difficult experiences and emerged with her sense of self fundamentally intact. She has been open about the therapeutic and personal work she has undertaken, about the importance of community and genuine friendship in her recovery of herself, and about the specific value she has found in the honesty of her rural Michigan life compared to the performance demands of her Hollywood years. There is in her public presence a quality of earned wisdom that resonates with an audience that has watched her since childhood and that has, in its own way, grown alongside her. Her story also carries a message that extends well beyond her own specific circumstances. It is a message about the particular courage required to rewrite a narrative after the world has already decided what that narrative is. Melissa Gilbert was America's sweetheart. She was a pioneer girl, the moral center of a beloved family drama, and later the public face of a redemptive second marriage. Each of those identities was real in some dimension and false in others. In choosing to speak honestly, she has made herself more fully real than any of those constructed identities ever allowed her to be. The story of Melissa Gilbert and what she has chosen to expose about her marriage to Timothy Busfield is ultimately a story about the cost of silence and the value of truth. It is a story that the entertainment industry will not always welcome, because it exposes the mechanisms by which the industry encourages the management of personal reality in the service of public image. But it is a story that matters, both for what it tells us about one remarkable woman's journey and for what it tells us about the broader patterns that shape the lives of women in the public eye. Melissa Gilbert has always been known for her resilience. Now she is also known for her honesty. And in the long run, that honesty will matter far more than any role she has ever played.